Okay, hello and welcome back to the Broken Business Models podcast. We're your hosts, Ryan and James. And today, before we get into the podcast, just a quick disclaimer nothing in this podcast or any of our other content should be taken as investing advice. You should always do your own work, and we are just exercising our First Amendment rights to share with you our opinions based on publicly available information. So make sure to do your own work and consult a professional before making any investment decision. So with that being said, today what we're going to be talking about is quantum computing, and specifically one pure play quantum computing stock that we believe has been trading in an interesting manner over the past few months. So brief overview of what quantum computing is. Quantum computing is nothing new. It's been around for several decades. In fact, the first quantum computer was built by scientists as a demonstration back in 1998. So it's been around for a while as this kind of scientific area for physicists to do a lot of research on. And since then, many people have made demonstration level quantum computers, and companies such as Google and IBM have invested a ton of money into the field. The reason that companies like Google and IBM have invested so much money is because, from a theoretical perspective, quantum computing does have a lot of promise. So basically, quantum computing has the promise of revolutionizing anything that's affected by regular classical computing today. So anything that takes a lot of computing power, theoretically, a quantum computer could open up orders of magnitude bigger problems to be solved by computers by using this new technology. So you can imagine any field that uses a lot of computing, such as some example applications would be code breaking. Quantum computers could theoretically basically revolutionize the world of encryption and data privacy and stuff like that. It could revolutionize finance, certain areas of chemistry, data analytics, and basically a ton of different fields today. So because of that, if quantum computers can be made commercially viable, it could be huge for basically all parts of the economy today. And that's why companies like IBM and Google have been investing so much into the technology. And that's basically been building up over the past several decades with more and more investment and more scientific breakthroughs in progress, up until a recent breakthrough back in 2019, when Google actually announced that they had achieved something called quantum supremacy. So quantum supremacy is basically the theoretical, without getting into the scientific details, it's basically a theoretical milestone where a quantum computer can basically do something that a regular computer would not be able to do. So this is basically a representation of the technology being to the point where, at least in certain use cases, it's actually better than regular computers, which is the whole point of quantum computing. So obviously very exciting from a scientific perspective. However, in popular science, what they don't like to tell people is that this breakthrough is really not all it may be interpreted to be by people who are not actually quantum physicists themselves. So in this particular experiment that Google did to show quantum supremacy, basically what they did was they showed that the quantum computer could generate random numbers better than a supercomputer could. So you might think to yourself, why are they generating random numbers? How is that a representative task to show that a quantum computer is better than a regular computer? The short answer is it's not a particularly representative task of anything applicable, but is actually highly selected for the strengths and weaknesses of quantum computing. So a brief overview of the physics behind quantum computing. The reason that quantum computing has the potential to be so much more powerful than regular computing is because it operates on a quantum level where basically on the scale of inside an atom, things are happening to the electrons and protons and whatever at the atomic level, rather than on a macro level, like in a regular computer. And what that means is that things at the quantum level can happen much more quickly than at a macro level. The problem is that anything at the quantum level is inherently probabilistic, which means that they're random. So if you think about a regular computer, if you ask a regular computer, what is 1 plus 1, it's always going to give you 2. Essentially, regular computers cannot make a mistake. That's not true with quantum computers, and that's basically the biggest issue with quantum computing that scientists are trying to work with right now. So you ask a quantum computer, what's 1 plus 1? It'll give you a probabilistic distribution that's ideally centered around 2, but it could give you anything, basically. So that's why Google chose this particular use case of generating random numbers, is because this is something that quantum computers can do naturally, that conventional computers can do, but they're not designed to do specifically. So because of this probabilistic nature of quantum computing, you need a lot of what are called qubits, which are little mini units of a quantum computer, to basically ask all these qubits the same question. And if all of them give you the same answer, or an answer close to something, then you can basically infer that that is the correct answer. And you need that because the answers are inherently random in a quantum computer. What that means is that you basically need a ton of qubits to build up to what's called a logical qubit, which is something that you can actually do real math on and create actual use cases for. And basically, scientists today have no idea how many qubits would be needed in order to overcome that hurdle. And because of that, quantum computing is an extremely, extremely difficult thing to envision being commercialized anytime in the near future. So basically, since 2019, there's been a lot of buzz around quantum supremacy, despite all these concerns around it. And people on Wall Street wasted no time taking advantage of it. So back in 2021, during the SPAC craze, several companies went public via SPAC that claimed to be working on quantum computing in a pure play fashion. So one is called IonQ, one is called Rigetti Computing, and one is called D-Wave Quantum. So they went public at the peak of the SPAC craze, but since then, when the market started going down, all of these highly pre-revenue quantum computing companies went basically towards zero. However, since then, one of these companies, IonQ, has basically been pumping by orders of magnitude from its lows, whereas the other two have continued their trudge towards zero. So very, very interesting behavior by one of these three different pure play quantum computing companies that kind of suggests some unusual things going on behind the scenes at this company. So with that, I've rambled a bit about quantum computing. I'll hand it over to you, James, to explain what is going on with IonQ as compared to these other quantum computing startups.
Yeah, so I think you gave a great intro about kind of the science behind quantum computing. So just like to put a finer point on that, as we kind of move away from the theoretical science and move towards the real world, the main thing to understand is that as of today, no company, nobody has ever made a quantum computer that can actually do anything useful in the real world. As Ryan was talking about, the quantum computer's output is inherently random, and nobody has yet figured out a way to correct for this randomness in such a way that it would be useful for real world applications. But you have these companies, including IonQ being the biggest one by market cap, who says we're just on the verge of reaching the point where our quantum computer is good enough for real world applications. And this has created a huge amount of hype, and the stock price has surged over the past few months. Currently, the company has an almost $4 billion market cap. And in the past 12 months, they've only generated $16 million of revenue, which is like a rounding error basically compared to their market cap. And they've had a $109 million operating loss. So this has tiny revenue and massive losses, but yeah, it has a massive market cap because people are so hyped up because people think that they're right around the corner from making a practical a quantum computer with practical applications. Now we're going to go through a few major concerns we have with IonQ that we think all investors should be aware of. So IonQ's main selling point and the reason why the stock has done so well is that they claim to have the most powerful quantum computer on the market today. And so this is a press release they released in February of 2022. They said their quantum computer, which they call IonQ Aria, was demonstrated to be the most powerful quantum computer on the market in an independent industry-wide benchmarking study. So that sounds pretty good, right? So as we described earlier, no quantum computer has ever done anything of practical usefulness. But if IonQ's quantum computer is already the most powerful on the market, you would think that they would be the first to get to the finish line of doing something practically useful. But if we look at this independent benchmarking study that they're referring to, we have some major concerns with it. So first of all, so this is the study. It's called Application-Oriented Performance Benchmarks for Quantum Computing. It's published online for freely available to view. Anybody can go find this and read it. So they said it was independent. Now, the first issue is one of the co-authors of this independent study was Sanika Jory, who at the time of working on this study was an employee of IonQ. So how is this an independent study when you have an employee of the company working on the study? That's our first big concern. And so what this study was doing is quantum computing is a very nascent industry and a very nascent technology. So there doesn't really exist any agreed upon ways to compare various quantum computers to see which one is better than the other. So what this study was doing was looking at various benchmarks and various ways of testing the quantum computers to experiment with some different ways of trying it out. But in this study, they specifically said that these results, the results of the studies, are explicitly not intended to be used to compare different processors. And the different processors they're referring to are different quantum computers, those from IonQ and those made by other companies. They also said that the results are not intended to perform or highlight comparisons between different systems, but rather to demonstrate our benchmarking suite. Any comparisons would be quickly outdated and therefore potentially misleading and erroneous. So the entire point of the study is that they're experimenting with some various benchmarks that they came up with. They are in no way saying that these benchmarks are capable of showing that one quantum computer is better than another. And they explicitly say that. So you cannot use this study to say that the IonQ or any other quantum computer is any better than any other quantum computer, because that is not what the study was designed to do. And they tell you explicitly, it could not get more explicit than this, that this should not be used for comparisons of different quantum computers. So what does IonQ do? They cite this study to say IonQ Aria was demonstrated to be the most powerful quantum computer on the market. Now, this is extremely misleading because that is not what the study said. So this is the first massive red flag about them basically trying to hype up their technology above what the evidence would reasonably allow you to say. So the next big red flag with IonQ is that it was co-founded by two individuals, Dr. Chris Monroe and Dr. Jung Song Kim. So Chris Monroe is a professor at the University of Maryland and a professor at Duke University. Jung Song Kim is also a professor at Duke University. Now, they founded this IonQ company many years ago, but throughout this whole time, they've continued their jobs at the two universities they work at. And they also hold, to this day, senior management positions at IonQ. Chris Monroe is the chief scientist of IonQ. Jung Song Kim is the chief technology officer of IonQ. So Chris Monroe is currently working three jobs: professor at University of Maryland, professor at Duke University, and chief scientist of IonQ. Jung Song Kim is working two full-time jobs, one as a professor at Duke and the second as the chief technology officer of IonQ. So remember, IonQ is a $4 billion company. You would think that if you co-founded a $4 billion company and had a C-suite executive position at the company, that would be worthy of your full attention and it would be your full-time job. So why are they continuing to be professors at their universities? Well, as it turns out, the reason, at least in my opinion, the reason would probably be that both the University of Maryland and Duke universities are related parties to IonQ, and their involvement with IonQ are necessary for IonQ's success as a business. So the University of Maryland, the physics department of the University of Maryland, where Chris Monroe works, happens to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest customer of IonQ. They pay IonQ millions of dollars for access to IonQ's quantum computers. Also, both the University of Maryland and Duke are basically contract research organizations for IonQ. So IonQ pays both the University of Maryland and Duke to do research and development on behalf of IonQ. So these companies are extremely intertwined with these two universities, and they have two C-suite executives who happen to be the two co-founders who are still working full-time jobs as professors at those universities. So it creates a very complicated situation with related party transactions, which in our opinion are very concerning. And we'll get more into that later. So IonQ, as we showed here, so despite the fact that no quantum computer, including IonQ's, has ever done anything of practical usefulness that a traditional computer could not do, they still generated $16 million of revenue in the past trailing 12 months. So where did this revenue come from? This first paragraph here is from their 2022 Form 10-K filing. So they said that the company's revenue was primarily from three significant customers for the year ended 2022. And a significant customer is a customer that accounts for greater than 10% of total revenue. And they said that these three significant customers created the revenue primarily came from them. So they don't give us the exact number, but that makes me think that the vast majority of the revenue came from just three customers. And this is from their second quarter Form 10Q for 2023. In the first half of 2023, it was still the revenue primarily came from three significant customers. So who are these customers? Well, we know that one of these three significant customers is the University of Maryland, which is a related party because Dr. Chris Monroe, the chief scientist of IonQ, still works there as a professor and presumably has influence over the University of Maryland's budget. So basically, it's when you have related party transactions, this is very concerning because you can get a situation where it's basically the right hand giving money to the left hand. Hypothetically, you could have Dr. Chris Monroe saying, okay, I want to pump up the revenue of my publicly traded IonQ company. And as somebody with some influence or decision-making power at the University of Maryland. I will sign these deals to give money to IonQ, which makes it look like IonQ has real revenue. And then, so that is very concerning that they are relying so heavily on a related party. But they have three customers. And so, who are the other two significant customers? Well, we can do some digging and try to make some guesses. So, this is from a recent investor presentation that they did. And they give a list of their premier partners and customers. So, these here are all their partners and customers. So, first of all, we've already went over University of Maryland. University of Maryland is a related party. Now, multiple other of these customers, Hyundai, Airbus, and the Fidelity, which is here the Fidelity Center for Applied Technology, all of these companies have, at some point in the past, invested in IonQ's equity. We don't know how much because companies are only required to disclose how much of a stock they own if they own more than 5% of IonQ. So each of these customers own less than 5%. So we don't know how much stock they own today. And we honestly don't even know if they even own any stock today. All we know is that Hyundai, Airbus, and Fidelity have all in the past invested into IonQ. And they could still be invested into IonQ. There has been no information that any of them have ever sold their stock. So for the purposes of this presentation, let's just assume that all of them are still invested in IonQ. Now, again, that comes with problems of related party customers. So technically, Hyundai, Airbus, and Fidelity are not listed by IonQ as related parties. And there's some very specific accounting rules about whether or not a customer is material and a whole host of other factors of whether or not a specific customer is categorized as a related party. But from my perspective, if, say, Hyundai, Airbus, Fidelity, if they are invested in IonQ stock, they benefit from IonQ stock going up. And obviously, if they give revenue, if they sign a contract and give revenue to IonQ, that will benefit the stock price of IonQ and benefit their own holding. So I don't really consider these potentially related party customers, or at least in my opinion, what I would consider to be as good as related party customers, to be kind of real outside customers. So who are the real outside customers, the customers who have not invested into IonQ? Well, there's a few of them. There's Accenture, the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force Research Lab, the Dow Chemical Company, Goldman Sachs, and General Electric. So why are these companies partnering with IonQ, given the fact that IonQ's quantum computer has to date never done anything of practical significance? So we'll go through each of these one by one. So Accenture is a technology consulting firm. They'll go to various large corporations will hire them to do technology consulting. So this is from a press release released by Accenture. They said, Accenture and IonQ will help clients explore and experiment with quantum solutions designed to address mission-critical business problems. So basically what Accenture is doing is going around to all of their own customers and saying, hey, IonQ has this quantum computer. Maybe do you want to try to experiment with it? Okay, but it's all experimental. No real world use case has ever been achieved yet. But, if some company is like, oh, maybe we should look into quantum computing because at some point in the future, maybe it could be useful. So this partnership with Accenture does not prove that IonQ has any real world use case. The next is the U.S. Air Force Research Lab. And in September of 2022, the IonQ put out a press release saying IonQ announced that it has secured a $13 million contract to supply the U.S. Air Force Research Lab with access to its trapped ion system. Now, this sounds very good. So $13 million is huge compared to how tiny IonQ's existing revenue is. Remember, in the trailing 12 months, they've only made $16 million of revenue. So for them to get a $13 million contract to provide um, just to provide access to its quantum computer. Well, that must mean its quantum computer is so good that just getting access to it and being able to do some calculations on it is worth $13 million. However, the US Department of Defense also released a press release regarding this exact same contract. And what they said is it's subtle, but it's materially different than what IonQ said. They said this $13 million contract provides for the delivery and installation of a quantum computer. So, what does that mean? A delivery and installation. To me, that sounds like IonQ is going to be selling AFRL a quantum computer. So, obviously, if you're going to buy something, that's going to cost you way more than renting it. And they want to, from here, it sounds like they're going to buy it. But then on this IonQ's press release, it's like they're going to rent it. So who is telling the truth here? And you have to look at the credibility and the incentives. What reason would the U.S. Department of Defense have to lie about something like this compared to IonQ, which is a publicly traded company, which is incentivized to increase its stock price? Now, and why would they lie about this? Because if the Air Force Research Lab was really paying them $13 million just to get access to the computer, well, that makes it look like this quantum computer is a lot more valuable than it actually is. So the Air Force Research Lab, they just want to buy this quantum computer so that they can do their own experimentation on it. But again, there's still no real world use cases for it. This is all experimental. So the next customer is Dow Chemical, which is a big chemical company. So they partnered with IonQ and they did some research and they released a research report. And this is the abstract of the research report. They said, we experimentally demonstrated end-to-end pipeline for maximizing quantum resources and maintaining accuracy. And here they talk about our experimental results. Early demonstration for potential problem decomposition. Everything is experimental. They have not accomplished anything tangible, anything that would be useful in the real world. And we'll see this basically with all of their other examples. So their next customer is Goldman Sachs, and they partnered with IonQ. They paid them, some probably small amount of money to get access to IonQ's quantum computer, and they tinkered around with some experimentation. They said they had experimental demonstration of amplitude estimations of state-of-the-art trapped ion computers, and they did these amplitude estimations with like a couple different techniques, the maximum likelihood technique and the Chinese remainder theorem. And they tested the two theorems against each other, and they said the maximum likelihood had some benefits, the CRT had some benefits. But again, this is all experimental. They have not accomplished anything tangible. The next with General Electric. Basically what General Electric did is they downloaded 3 or 4 indexes. And what they're talking about here are stock market indexes. So they basically went onto Yahoo Finance and downloaded a historical time series of like the S&P 500 and NASDAQ and whatever. And they did some like simulations running tests on like stock market indexes. And they said that the quantum framework outperformed those of classical modeling approaches in some cases. And the quantum copulus can potentially lead to smarter data-driven analysis. But this is basically all just BS, because what are they going to do with just like downloading historical data of stock market indexes? You can't like predict anything useful just by looking at historical data that you couldn't do with a classical computer. And then the language is so vague. Outperform classical modeling in some cases. Well, what are they talking about? They did not disclose any further details. So everything is so vague that how can we say that this IonQ computer has done anything useful, which it obviously has not. And this was one from the Fidelity Center of Applied Technology. Remember, Fidelity is an investor in IonQ. So they have an incentive to give IonQ revenue to boost. They have incentive to pay IonQ money to boost IonQ's revenue and help pump the stock price. So what Fidelity did is they downloaded a historical time series of Microsoft stock and Apple stock. And they did some weird like correlation thing and made these scatter plots. And they said that based on their scatter plots or whatever, their quantum system is better. But nowhere do they say why these scatter plots are useful for anything, because they're not. Okay, so if you are Fidelity is it's an asset manager, they invest money. So you downloaded some stock price data. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to develop some trading strategy and outperform the market? Are you going to, do some risk management thing with this? What are you going to do with it? And the answer is they've done nothing with it. They just created some scatter plots. Nowhere do they say that we've actually applied this in the real world and done something useful, because they haven't. And this all goes back to the point where IonQ is still cannot do anything useful of practical significance. And all of their customers are basically just doing these very small experimentations with them. So this goes back to the point. How is it the case that IonQ can generate $16 million in revenue when they're basically just doing these? All they can provide is these quantum experimentations, which have zero real world operational relevance today. And this goes back to the three significant customers, right? So the majority of their revenue comes from just three customers. We know one of them is the related party, University of Maryland. Maybe the other two of their significant customers, maybe it's Hyundai, Airbus, or Fidelity, companies that have invested into IonQ stock and have an incentive to give IonQ revenue to pump up the stock price. Because when investors see that IonQ is generating revenue, they're like, oh, this quantum computing is legit, the stock price goes up. Well, maybe if you're one of these investors, even if the quantum computing is completely useless and completely operationally irrelevant for you, you might still want to give them money just to pump up the stock price. And that's something to be very concerned with when you have customer concentration that is coming potentially from related parties, because we know all of these companies have been investors in IonQ and are customers of IonQ. And we know that the majority of the revenue comes from just three customers. So it could easily be the case. We don't know this for sure because they have not disclosed who all three of the customers are. But if it is the case that these three customers are all the University of Maryland plus two other companies who have also are shareholders in IonQ, well, that would be very concerning indeed, because that would show that no unrelated party really has any interest in putting significant amounts of money into IonQ's quantum computing services. So the next thing that I want to get into is the more technical aspect of the story. And IonQ has received a huge amount of hype, it appears, from retail investors. And one of the biggest pumpers of the stock is a man named Sean Kwan. So Sean Kwan has 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. He is a South Korean national and is the self-proclaimed Korean IonQ long-term investor community leader. So he has this YouTube channel and he publishes videos almost every single day, and the majority of the videos are about IonQ. So look here, IonQ, 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 IonQ. He is a major IonQ bull, and he publishes about this in his videos, encouraging his followers to buy shares of IonQ's stock. And what's really interesting is that this guy, Sean Kwan, has been given extraordinary access to IonQ's senior management team. This is one of his videos released a few months ago where he is interviewing senior executives in person. He's doing an in-person interview of senior executives from IonQ and publishing it on his YouTube channel. This man here is Peter Chapman, the CEO of IonQ. This man here is Dr. Kim Jung-sung, the co-founder and chief technology officer of IonQ. And this is a separate video from a year ago of him interviewing the co-founder of IonQ. and there's Sean Kwan here zooming in from Bikini Bottom. So the fact that IonQ's senior management team is giving so much time and so much attention to this YouTuber who's basically pumping up the stock price is, a bit strange. You typically don't see CEOs and senior management team of a large publicly traded company um, spending so much time with a YouTuber. But the fact that they're paying so much attention to this guy, maybe it means that they really want to get out there and promote the stock, because Sean Kwan's videos are extremely promotional about IonQ stock. And why might IonQ's senior management team want to be promoting the stock price? Well, maybe it's because they're selling huge numbers of shares. So this chart here shows the insider transactions of the CEO and the two co-founders of IonQ since the company went public. So this only includes buy and sell orders. It does not include shares that they receive as stock-based compensation. This is just them making decisions in the open market. Do I want to buy or sell shares of IonQ? Since the company went public, there has been one very small insider buying from these three men. And then ever since then, it's been massive amount of selling. They've just been selling the stock and not buying. So if you are the management of the company and you are selling a huge amount of stock, obviously you want the stock price to go up. And this kind of fits in with a lot of other things, like them going on this YouTube channel trying to promote the stock, as well as them giving what are, in my opinion, extremely misleading press release about their deal with the AFRL, where they're basically saying that they're renting it and making $13 million from renting it. But in reality, it appears like they're selling it, which is a completely different transaction, completely different economics and margins associated with that than what they're giving, what looks to me like a misleading press release. And then they have this blatantly misleading statement about their quantum computer being the most powerful quantum computer on the market, when all you have to do is read the study itself and see that this is not the case. So there's just a huge number of red flags with this company. And to wrap it up, we have a few questions which we would like the management of IonQ to answer to clear up some of our concerns. First, besides the University of Maryland, who are the three significant customers who drive the majority of your revenue? Are they related parties? What percentage of revenue comes from customers who are also shareholders? Because we know Hyundai, Airbus, and Fidelity are both shareholders and customers of IonQ, which is a potential conflict of interest. What percentage of your revenue comes from these three companies, which are also shareholders? Next, if your quantum computer is really so good, why do you make materially misleading statements about the independent study? That's that study we just talked about. And then finally, why is your press release about the Air Force Research Lab contract different than the DoD's own press release? So those are, I think, three major concerns we have with IonQ, that most of the, if you go on social media and see people talking about the company, talking about, oh, this is so revolutionary, this is the great quantum computing company, I think very few people have actually gone into the weeds, look through their regulatory filings and look through their press releases. And if you do the homework, you'll find some very concerning things about this company.
To me, when I take a step back and think about this company, IonQ, what I think about it is like quantum computing as a field is an extremely, extremely scientific, like high-tech area, right? It's not rocket science, but it's literally quantum physics, which is may as well be rocket science so to speak. And they're companies like IBM, massive companies where all the smartest people in the physics community who are interested in quantum computing, they would want to work at those types of companies. And IonQ, in comparison, is tiny, right? So
Mhm.
the idea that IonQ could compete, even before we get into the technical details of what they're doing versus what Google's doing versus the state of the industry in general, like there has to be, to me at least, very strong evidence that IonQ is doing something breakthrough to believe that, for me to believe that they have a significant chance of competing with Google and IBM. And to me, at least, based on everything you've said, uh, none of that has been satisfied.
Yeah, and I think really the key takeaway is quantum computing is an unproven technology, an unproven industry. At this point, everything is experimental. So what really matters is whose technology is the best. And the only reason why you would think, so IonQ wants you to believe that their technology is the best. So they'll be the first one to get to commercial viability. But when you can see so blatantly how they're trying to mislead investors, saying, like, I encourage everybody, just look up this headline just look up this headline on Google. You'll find their press release and go read the independent industry wide benchmarking study that they cite and see what they say about it here. And then actually read the study and see what the study says. And it's so different. And it's just like it cannot get to me it just cannot get more blatant than this when the study says these results are explicitly not intended to be used to compare different processors. Any comparisons would be quickly outdated and therefore potentially misleading or erroneous. This is not intended to perform or highlight comparisons between different systems, but rather to demonstrate our benchmarking suite. This study could not be more clear, saying you cannot use this to say that one quantum computer is better than another. And then what does IonQ do? They say that their quantum computer is better than everyone
And
else's.
they even have
It's
one of their
so
own
blatant.
people on the paper, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
and then
not
they say independent, and then look at the authors. One per working at IonQ. It's ridiculous. Like,
like you
do they
cannot
not
say that
think?
it's just some PR person who didn't really understand what was going on, right? They literally
Yeah, they were
were
literally
involved in
there
the
doing the study, and they're so blatant where they even have a link to this study which contradicts everything they say. It's like really insulting to the intelligence of their investor base that they think people are so stupid they're just going to read the headline and not even go down and click the link of the actual study. And I think that's another issue where maybe because look, I'm not a physicist. I don't have a PhD. I'm not an expert in quantum computing, and 99% of people who are buying IonQ stocks are not experts in quantum computing. So if you're not like an expert in this field, you're probably not going to be getting into the weeds and looking at all of these studies and trying to figure out, who is telling the truth of who actually has the best quantum computer. You're just going to look at these press releases and look at the revenue is tiny, but the revenue growth at IonQ is very strong. You're just going to look at that and assume they're legit. But you have to go down at another level, look at the related party transactions, look at the customers who are also shareholders, and then you don't even have to know anything about quantum computing. I know nothing about quantum computing, but I know English. I can read English and I can read this study and see that what they're saying clearly, loud and clear in this study is the exact opposite of what IonQ wants you to believe. And it's just such a blatant, like it's just such a blatant misrepresentation. Like, how can they get away with this?
yeah, like any prudent investor in such a hard tech industry that's so in its infancy with quantum computing, and even experts say that it's probably decades out from commercial viability in terms of anything being useful from quantum computing. Like you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you have something special. And when IonQ is making these statements that appear to be intellectually dishonest, at least to my unscientific viewpoint, um, like there's no way that they can achieve that when they're appearing to be playing these gimmicks and syntactical um, gymnastics.
Yeah, and then the other thing that really concerns me is this AFRL contract, because it's just so weird. They're like they're supplying access to the trapped ion systems, and then the Department of Defense is saying they're going to get delivery and installation. Well, which one is it? It's like if I sold you, like, it's like if I'm a car dealership, you come to the car and you buy a car for $20,000. And then I go and tell my investors, hey, look, my business is doing so great. Somebody paid me $20,000 to rent the car, which would obviously be like extremely profitable and much more profitable than selling you that car. But then the customer thinks he bought the car. So what is going on? Like, it's just so weird. Like, everything about this company is just so weird.
Yeah,
And when this is like,
creating
yeah,
the actual quantum computer is extremely expensive. So
yeah.
just selling a little bit of time on the quantum computer versus delivering and installing the quantum computer on AFRL's premises are two extremely different things.
And so who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe the Department of Defense, who has no conceivable incentive to lie about this? Or do you believe IonQ when the insiders are dumping stock massively and obviously want the share price to go up? So who do you think is more trustworthy in this situation?
And it's not like everyone else is doing it either, right? Like we saw, like IBM, Google, they don't put out press releases with the same level of syntactic, um, gimmicks and questionability. And there's those other two quantum computing startups as well, and you see the difference between IonQ and the others very clearly in the stock price and investor hype as well, right?
Yeah.
So all very very concerning for anyone looking at this company from the outside.
So I think that just about wraps it up for what we wanted to say about IonQ. Obviously, we have huge concerns about this company, but if any of you in the viewership have anything else to add, or maybe something about the company that you think we missed, please let us know in the comment section below.